You done now?
What a godforsaken place.
Professor Plum and Miss Scarlett, I didn't realize you were acquainted.
We weren't.
May I present Professor Plum and Miss Scarlett? Of course, since you've each been addressed by a pseudonym, you'll have realized that nobody here is being addressed by their real name.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Clue the Movie podcast, where we talk about the cult classic 1985 film Clue the Movie. We look at it and examine it 1 minute at a time, or 10 minutes in. And my name is Brad Gilmore, and I'm joined always by Jeff Smith. Jeff, that was a minute, man. That was a minute.
It was a good minute. I was getting worried as we were getting closer to the 60-second mark that we weren't going to have that final line by Wadsworth. But we got there.
We made it. So this
right, everyone's here. Almost everyone's here.
We have one more dinner guest to wait on, but we have the lion's share of all the game piece characters. We now know them all. This minute starts with Professor Plum and Miss Scarlett getting out of the vehicle, of Professor Plum's vehicle, and ends with Wadsworth addressing the room of all of our characters. Okay, so much here. First off, we see all the cars kind of for the first time a little bit, where you could see all the colors, in the rain.
It's very subtle because they keep the cars. I mean, they went through all the trouble of having the cars be the actual colors of the game pieces, but they're way in the shadow, and it's very easy to miss. And I certainly didn't catch it for years and years and years until I think somebody on the internet posted it, and I went back and looked and went, oh yeah, I guess so. You really see it at the end, Mrs. Peacock's blue car. But yeah, and Mr. Green's car, you can see it one shot later, I think.
It's interesting. At first, when you see Christopher Lloyd and Leslie Ann Warren, they're kind of running to the door because it's raining. Christopher Lloyd brings the umbrella for her, right?
Oh, gentleman.
Very gentleman. That's what I was going to point out. Very gentlemanly. And so at first you're thinking, oh, wow, this is a chivalrous gentleman. Again, this is the 1950s. This is chivalry maybe at its peak in the I don't know, but that's just kind of when you think of chivalry, you think of kind of the 1950s, 60s, Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra, very buttoned up, classy individual.
Christopher Lloyd, yeah.
Chris Lloyd, definitely in the same vein as those two others. Unknown member of the Rat Pack, Chris Lloyd. And he's bringing her to the front door, and they're looking where they just came from.
Right.
Which I don't know if I've ever been to the front door for somebody's house and I get to the front and then look back to where I was with my back turned. Well, do you know what was the point of that?
You never made a good entrance then, Brad, because you're really missing out. That's the reveal. That's if there was a camera inside the house, when you turned around, it would have pushed in on you.
It's true.
Maybe had glasses that come off. Maybe you probably don't need it. Or maybe because it's you, like the earbuds would pop out. And you'd be like,
and I'm here.
Or something great.
But they're looking backward, and he says it's a godforsaken place.
Right.
I wonder, this is my first thought, then why approach? I mean...
and it's not really. It's actually quite nice.
And it's kind of nice. It's just raining.
Yeah. Is he referring to the weather? Does it like the doghouse? Because he really hasn't seen much.
Well, because we know this is New England. They all live in the New England area.
Or Washington, which is,
a little further south.
But it's close. Yeah.
Close.
I mean, they certainly should be used to East Coast architecture.
East Coast architecture, sure. East Coast weather.
Definitely weather, yeah.
They should be aware of. So whether this is in, what do we say? We think it's like a Massachusetts or what do we
Yeah,
think?
we said probably a Massachusetts or maybe Maine.
Maine, Massachusetts
Yeah,
kind of thing. We're not sure, but somewhere in New England. Um, so he says this godforsaken place. They're looking back at where they just arrived from,
yeah,
and he takes his hand and puts it on the bottom, the buttocks
yeah.
of Miss Scarlet there, affirming our earlier suspicions of his creepiness. But what did you make of Scarlet's reaction to this advance from the professor?
I think Miss Scarlet is probably no stranger to this kind of activity. She almost looks like she's in disgust because it's him, or also maybe because it caught her off guard. And she probably prides herself on the type that, is always ready for something, to happen. So, she was busy looking out the rain and listening to him talk. He was able to sneak in a little bit, and she's almost just like, "Oh, you too," as she just kind of gets out of the way. But it's not like Mrs. Peacock would be if that happened. Or
Right. It was
she doesn't even
very
get Honey Bunch later, so I can only imagine.
very strange reaction. And on top of that, she kind of like, yeah, you're right. I don't know if she was taken aback by it as much as she was like, ugh, this. I thought I was going to a party. I'm having to deal with this.
Here we go.
You
Yeah,
an unwanted advance from a man, something that unfortunately women have to still deal with all the time. This
right.
one more forward, hopefully, than most. But her reaction was disgust-ish. You could tell she wasn't like you said, Miss Peacock would be taken aback by such a thing would happen.
I was annoyed.
More annoyed than anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm not at work right now.
And then they turn around because Wadsworth opens the door and he says, "Professor Plum, Miss Scarlet, I didn't know you two were acquainted." She says,
Right.
"We weren't." You know.
Yeah. They could have been looking apparently rather friendly to him, but
Let me ask you.
yeah.
We can
Ooh, I like
assume that Wadsworth was given information by his employer,
sure.
but how does he know exactly what they all look like? Was that a clue?
Well, they have photographs. They do have, the double negative is proof positive. I mean, definitely knows what Colonel Mustard and Yvette look like because they're in pictures later.
Right. No, but I'm saying, like, does he are we to assume that his employer gave him these dossiers with
Oh, sure.
with pictures? Because I was trying to figure out how does he know exactly who everyone is.
Really, just doing the process of elimination, that there's two more people coming and here they are, but I doubt that's what it was. He knew, only that you're to be known as Mrs. White
Mm-hmm.
when she gets there. So yeah, he knows everybody.
He knows everybody, but should that tell us maybe he's more clued in than we are led to believe, or is it more okay? Yeah, he's following orders from his employer.
Well, I mean, he does confess later that he's not just a butler; he was his butler. So that he's keeping secret already. He kind of seems like right now he's just butler for hire, which I guess is a thing. I don't know, like to host a private party.
A contracted butler, like
Yeah,
a one-off
right.
job.
Because then when he reveals I was in fact his butler, referring to Mr. Body, they're all surprised by that. But I guess it's because Mr. Body got there late and it's his house. That's the confusion in the beginning. I mean, we'll get to all those minutes and we'll be reminded why that is.
Chris Lloyd, obviously we know from Back to the Future, which came out earlier in the year that this film was released in July. This was in December. So Chris Lloyd, biggest star. This is his apex mountain, right? I mean, this stretch from 85 to 90 is the biggest for him ever, right?
Well, even Star Trek 3 is 83.
Okay, so yeah, a little bit before this then, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he got to be. I didn't recognize him for a long time that he was the bad guy Klingon, and I mean that voice gives him away. But Yeah, he had a very, very good run there with a lot of comedies that either were the biggest in the world, like Back to the Future or Who Framed Roger Rabbit, or other ones. He was in a movie with Michael Keaton called The Dream Team that was really good. He was in a movie with Howie Mandel and Colleen Camp called Walk Like a Man that I think maybe went straight to HBO. I saw that on HBO a lot growing up. And what else was he doing? Christopher Lloyd.
Okay, here's his run from
Yeah, go.
'83. You ready? We have Mr. Mom,
Okay.
To Be or Not to Be. I haven't seen that one.
Mel Brooks.
Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension.
Okay.
National Lampoon's Joy of Sex. 1985, he had just 2 movies, Back to the Future and Clue. Great year.
Bad.
86 was Miracles. 87 is Walk Like a Man and The Legend of the White Horse. 88 is Track 29, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and 8 Men Out, which I really like 8 Men Out.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
8 Men Out is really great, about the 1919 Chicago Black Sox. Back to the Future Part 2 also in 89. And then in 90, he had DuckTales, the movie, Back to the Future 3. And then he went on in 91 to Suburban Commando with Hulk Hogan, and
man.
the Addams Family. So pretty good run.
He's had a few really good franchises. I'm sure when he goes to conventions, he's got a great assortment of 8x10s to sign, depending on what your flavor of Christopher Lloyd is.
But it's got to be mainly Doc, right? It's mainly
I
Doc.
think so. I would have a tough time not getting Doc. 'Cause I love Clue, of course.
Right.
But come on, Back to the Future.
It's Back to the Future.
Yeah.
And then Leslie Ann Warren, I think we talked about on an early episode a little bit when her name came up in the credits. We know that she was Academy Award nominated, as we talked about before. She played Cinderella, I believe, in a early.
Yeah, that was her first thing. It was a TV movie because she was a dancer. That's how she started her career. She was in ballet, and then started doing theater, and then ended up in. I don't know if she did. It seems a lot of the actors at the time had a period there in the 70s where they were guest stars on a lot of shows like Emergency and like a lot of old Universal shows, Columbo, as they were on their way up.
She was in Columbo, SWAT, Doctor's Hospital. I remember this one because I've seen this. She played Lois Lane in It's a Bird, It's a Plane, It's Superman, which was a musical TV movie.
Okay. I could see that. Yeah. And then she spent a lot of years being confused with Susan Sarandon, unfortunately.
I know. They're very... my wife thought it was Susan Sarandon in the movie. Still people do. Someone on Twitter told me it was Susan Sarandon. Seth Payne, a radio host and football player.
You can get into a fight with... It is Susan Sarandon, I swear.
They do look very similar, especially in this movie.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely in this movie for sure.
Very similar. Very beautiful woman. Like shot like oh my gosh, beautiful in this movie. And not just because of the character she plays, but you're just like, oh wow. Her and Professor Plum enter the room, and again Yvette is there to greet them. The eye contact between Scarlett and Yvette is something I guess because now I'm looking literally at every small detail.
Yeah, you're really tearing it apart now.
Never noticed it before, but they share or at least Miss Scarlett looks at Yvette very glaringly like, oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Not surprised I'm seeing you here.
Right. So depending on which ending you want to go with, it's either, because there is one ending that Miss Scarlett is the only killer. And Yvette was working for her because Yvette worked at the brothel that Miss Scarlett is the madam for. Mm-hmm. So that makes sense. But if Yvette was kind of a sinister scam artist who could do accents and worked for Miss Scarlett, and she knew that, perhaps seeing her in a kind of sinister location where blackmail's happening, and now she's here, it's like, oh, now I know who blackmailed me. Or, you're involved. Okay, well, I'm not going to say anything because I'm curious to see how this is going to play out, and maybe I'll take care of you while I'm here.
It's a very interesting response, and you would think, I mean, with what we come to find out about Professor Plum and what we already know about him making the advance on Miss Scarlett, you would think that immediately after her rejection, I guess, of him, of somewhat. It was a soft rejection of Professor Plum, but a rejection nonetheless. You would think he'd automatically move on to the next female that got his gaze. However, when Yvette is there, he actually pays very little attention to Yvette and instead gets the glass of brandy and clings it with Miss Scarlet. So he's continuing his pursuit of Miss Scarlet.
It's true. I don't think he's necessarily the type to take a hint. So
that's true.
He set his sights. She's been in my car. He set his sights, but then when they go to dinner, he doesn't sit by her. He sits by Mrs. White. But I don't remember if they have I don't think they have assigned seats. It's just the way it happens. But he's definitely moving around.
Yeah. Well, the thing about him is he's really he's playing this character very well because he's off-putting. He's already off-putting a little bit. And you know, in a movie where you kind of love even the people you're not supposed to like, he is very good at being off-putting.
He's uncomfortable, that's for sure.
Uncomfortable is a great word.
Yeah.
Miss Scarlet, we've talked about it before. You would think that she'd come in dressed like Carmen Sandiego and have the big red hat and the big red, coat of some kind. But she's in green with this very interesting.
Oh, the hood is massive, and I'm sure she was probably happy that it didn't have to stay on the entire time. But I asked her about that, and I asked Michael Kaplan, who's the costume designer, about that too, and they were surprisingly quiet about it. I mean, it's a very big costume piece, and they just kind of both went, "Yeah, it was great." Oh, all right.
So no reason for the big hood?
No, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it was inspired by something, and maybe they just don't remember. But it's definitely a look at me kind of. I mean, it's bigger than a car seat that's on her head. I would love to have known what inspired that. I'm sure there's some probably old movie that one of the actresses way back in the 30s wore something like that, and you're gonna watch it one day and go, "That!"
And
like the Leonardo DiCaprio meme.
Right. And she wore emerald green to oppose the obvious view, right? Like instead of Mrs. White, we're going to put her in black with a hint. At least though Mrs. White has a hint of white. When she opens her coat, you see the big white, and the music kind of plays like a harpsichord kind of whimsical thing.
Really big, yeah. Da, 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 da. You will notice her. With Miss Scarlet, I think, and who knows, because she did get the part late in the game, but it was all the costumes were designed around the actors. So for Michael Kaplan, I guess he saw that color of green, which is a great color of green.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Beautiful.
But she has no hint of Scarlet.
It was originally a Carrie Fisher design, and then it got changed.
Oh yeah, that'd be a great question.
I know she had different versions of the skirt as far as tightness, because when they would run, she had a zipper on the side that she could unzip and actually move her legs to run up and down the hall.
So it was meant to have one way where it's very form-fitting and very
unfunctional.
Unfunctional. That's a great word for it.
Yeah.
And then there's so there's more than one, or it was the same dress but it had zippers.
No, there's more than one, and some were. I mean, it's I always go back to the future. Some, cars you can fly because they've got a crane stuck to them, and some are miniatures. She just had different dresses that did different jobs.
Yeah, effectively, very effective zippers. And I just wonder why she doesn't have the hint. No hint of Scarlet.
Yeah, most of them don't.
Well, I mean, Colonel Mustard's kind of got a little thing going on. Does Mr. Green not have a green tie?
No, I think him and Professor Plum, other than the bow tie, their suits are pretty similar.
That's true. Yeah, I don't see a hint of. Although I always thought his tie was green, but maybe it has like a small hint of green in it. I don't know. I'd have to look at it again. But we now have the game piece 6. They are in the study, and or just this is the study, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're in the study, and Wads.
Or is that the same?
I think it's the study. But they're in the library study, and Wadsworth is about to address them, and we're going to find out we're about to find out kind of what's going on.
Well, first we're going to have dinner.
Right.
That gong is about to get hit.
The gong's about to get hit any moment. Okay, we're going to find out not about what's going on, but more about whom they each are as individuals.
Yeah.
I do also wonder, God, so many questions here. I just wish that, and I know probably the filmmakers, and you probably asked them, of just the assignment of the aliases. Who came up with them?
I don't know if they even got that far into the detail. It was just here's why they're called that because we have to, because it's based on the game. And if they were called something else, they'd be called something else.
And you know what else is crazy is like we don't know any of the characters' last names, so we don't know like about the last real last names.
Right.
So we don't know anything about their heritage. Any indicators of religious faith of any kind or anything. We have literally no details about any of them. We don't know anything if they're German, Italian, Irish, Jewish, otherwise.
Well, in a way, what you bring to the game when you play is yourself. So I mean, it's could be considered whoever you decide. When I play Clue, I'm usually Mr. Green because I like Michael McKean, but I don't play him. I guess it's weird to say, but I kind of talk as the character as I walk around the board. I'll be honest. And my Mr. Green is a little more aggressive when he plays Clue.
Why also the only indicator that we get from any of them really are from Professor Plum and Colonel Mustard. They have a professor and colonel, as opposed to everyone else has a Mr. or Mrs. or Miss.
Yeah, well, they aren't really the only ones with titles, and it's interesting that they actually are those things.
Right.
Because even in what we're about to get to, somebody asks Colonel Mustard, "Are you indeed a real colonel?" And he said, yeah.
Indeed, I am. And Mrs. White and Mrs. Peacock, those are indicators of their marriage. At least we know they were married at least at one point, most likely. And then it's Miss Scarlet.
Yeah.
So we know that she's a single woman.
She doesn't need a man.
She's independent, and quite the businesswoman. So man, we're getting there, man. This was a great minute, though. There was a lot there. That was a very juicy.
I'm very happy when they end up sitting around the table. I think that's so iconic of them. Once the soup shows up, then now we're rolling.
Oh my goodness, Jeff Smith. We're 10 minutes in, and
we're getting close to that inciting incident, and we're getting close to the very first rapid fire dialogue explosion coming very soon from Eileen Brennan.
It's gonna be great. Well, we're 10 minutes.
Don't leave. Now it's getting really good, everybody.
Yes. Well, Jeff Smith, ClueDoc.com. You can find me at thebobradgilmore.com. Clue the Movie Podcast. 10 minutes in. 11 is around the corner. Oh, is it getting great?
Going to 11.
These go to 11. And we'll see y'all next time on Clue the Movie Podcast.
Oh, Brad, what have you done now?